Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the honourable member for the constructive approach he has taken to working with all partners involved in the Mid Wales Growth Deal. My ministerial colleague in the other place has undertaken extensive engagement with local authorities and the private sector in Mid Wales, most recently at Welshpool on the 26th of May 2019.
The University of Aberystwyth and the internationally acclaimed institution of IBERS are both key partners in the Mid Wales Growth Deal, and the facilities of the new innovation campus at Gaerwen will both cement their place as leaders in areas of agri-food and biotechnology, and also allow the area to become the centre for expertise in controlled environment agriculture and vertical farming. Now, the benefits this would bring to the agricultural industry are significant. But rather than take my word for it, would the Minister consider visiting the campus at Gaerwen so that he can see for himself the world-leading research that is being undertaken in Ceredigion?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I certainly have an invite I think the Welsh Office Minister would find hard to refuse, and we'll try and coordinate. But I think it is vital that the Mid Wales Growth Deal focuses on sectors such as agri-tech, where there is a significant opportunity to introduce transformational economic change. We encourage our partners to work closely with research institutions such as IBERS to put together a compelling case to both governments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Given that a Western Rail link to Heathrow would connect South Wales stations such as Swansea, Cardiff and Newport directly to Heathrow, cut up to half an hour off journey times, and mean London and South Wales would be better connected, benefiting businesses, tourists and the Welsh economy.
Very well done. I think we've blurted out, man.
What representations has the Secretary of State personally made to the Chancellor and the Department for Transport to support this scheme?
To say question 13, but he was so overcome with excitement that he neglected to do so. Never mind, we'll take it as part of 12. Minister, we're grateful.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member opposite will know, I'm quite a fan of the potential benefits of the Western Rail access to Heathrow, and potentially it could unlock more growth and opportunities across the great areas served by Great Western. And regular representations are made, and I'm sure the Chancellor who's now on the bench will have heard those he's just made.
Well done. Chris Elmore!
The reality is, with Ford with the potential closures, 1,700 jobs gone, between 6,000 and 7,000 in the supply chain. It's no good the Secretary of State saying manufacturing is buoyant with all these potential job closures coming. We need economic stimulus packages.
Expressing concerns at escalating tensions. But what do we see the Labour Party do? One of his MPs was inviting rebel leaders of the insurgency into the House of Commons. Yet again, Labour on the wrong side of the argument.
Jeremy Corbyn!
The Prime Minister doesn't appear to understand the depth of feeling at the UN, parliaments around the world and even the US Senate and House on this situation. The UN itself has warned that by the end of 2019, if the war continues, 230,000 people would have lost their lives, 140,000 of which are children under the age of 5. The UK and EU law states that the government must, and I quote, not grant a licence if there is a clear risk that the items used might be used in the commission of a serious violation of international humanitarian law. The government said they'd used the following criteria to judge that, and I quote, an understanding of Saudi military procedures, continuing engagement with the Saudis at the highest level, and Saudi public commitments to international humanitarian law. So if the Saudi government says they're respecting human rights, do we then ignore all evidence on the ground in Yemen and continue to sell weapons to this regime, which has led to this appalling death toll already in this conflict?
I say to the right honourable gentleman, first of all, as I've made clear, we're seeking permission to appeal the recent judgment. But the judgment isn't about whether the government made the right or wrong decisions, but about the decision-making process and whether it was rational. So we are considering the implications of the judgment alongside the permission to appeal that we're seeking. And while we do this, we won't grant any new licences for exports to Saudi Arabia and its coalition partners, which might be used in the conflict in Yemen. But he talks about the conflict in Yemen. As I've just said, said. Let's remember what happened, why we are seeing this conflict in Yemen. It was the overthrow of the internationally recognised government by rebel insurgents. We are all concerned. We are all concerned. We are all concerned about the humanitarian situation in Yemen. It was the overthrow of the internationally recognised government. The Shadow Foreign Secretary might like, actually, as this is an area of concern to her, remit to actually listen to what the government is doing. We are all concerned about the humanitarian situation in Yemen.
Order. The questions must be heard and the answers must be heard. The Prime Minister.
We are all concerned about the humanitarian situation in Yemen. That is why, since the start of the conflict in 2015, our total commitment to Yemen, it now stands at £770 million. We are one of the major contributors to support for the humanitarian effort. Ultimately, the only way to resolve this issue is through a political settlement, and that is why we are supporting the efforts of the UN Special Envoy Martin Griffiths.
If that's the case, why is the government appealing the judgment instead of promoting a peace settlement in Yemen? Since 2016, Mr. Speaker, for 3 years, United Nations experts have been saying that the Saudi coalition has violated international humanitarian law in Yemen. This air campaign has killed tens of thousands and injured and displaced many more. The government says there can be no military solution to this particular conflict. There can only be a negotiated and political solution. If that is the case, why have they pumped £4.6 billion of military equipment into this brutal bombardment already? There can be no military solution to this particular conflict.
What we do believe, as I've just said, I've said in answer to his last question, I said it, I think, in answer to the first question that he gave me, that the only way to ensure the security and stability of Yemen for the future is through a political settlement. That is why this government is supporting the work that is being done by the UN Special Envoy Martin Griffiths. That is why we are continuing to use our diplomatic efforts, including, as I said, the Foreign Secretary holding a Yemen Quad on Saturday, to encourage others around the table. We are very clear. We support the efforts to secure the agreement by the parties to the conflict to implement the Stockholm agreements. That is an important part of the process leading to peace and a political solution. We need to ensure that work is essential so that progress can be made at the next round of peace talks and so that humanitarian supply lines can be opened up.
Jeremy Corbyn.
It's her Trade Secretary who said there couldn't be a military solution to this conflict. Surely the government should think on this and stop the sale of arms to Saudi Arabia. Just last week, the UN Special Rapporteur, Agnes Callamard, said there is credible evidence that the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and other high-level officials are personally responsible for the horrific murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Does the Prime Minister accept that assessment? The UN Special Rapporteur, Agnes Callamard, said there is
we do want to see accountability for this horrific murder. I raised the death of Jamal Khashoggi with King Salman at the Sharm summit. That's the second time I've done so. I've raised it with the Crown Prince at the G20 last year. I've stressed the importance of those responsible being held to account, of due process being followed. We expect Saudi Arabia to take the action necessary to ensure such violations of international and national laws can't happen again. The right direction, the right way to take this is through a judicial process, and we're obviously closely following the continuing investigation. We expect it to proceed in line with internationally recognised legal standards.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, there is overwhelming evidence that war crimes have been committed in Yemen by Saudi Arabian forces.
And we're obviously closely following the continuing
A
investigation.
state that flouts every human rights norm at home and abroad. Its government believes that it can kill with impunity journalists or civil rights campaigners, Yemenis or Bahrainis. It funds extremism around the world. But the UK has supplied them with over £4.5 billion worth of deadly weapons. UK weapons which have been used in indiscriminate attacks on civilians in which over 200,000 people have been killed. And hundreds of thousands more stand on the brink of famine, of starvation and of death from wholly preventable diseases. Surely, Mr. Speaker, the Court of Appeal judgment should be a wake-up call to the Prime Minister and the Government. So instead of appealing the judgment, why not accept the judgment and stop arms sales to Saudi Arabia now and bring about peace in the Yemen and save those lives? To the Prime Minister and the Government. So instead of appealing the judgment,
the right honourable gentleman says to me, bring about peace in the Yemen. It's exactly what we are working with our international partners to do through the United Nations and through the Yemen Quad. But also the right honourable gentleman is talking about the relations that we have with Saudi Arabia. That is a relationship that has saved lives of British citizens in the past. But let's just look at some of the relationships that the right honourable gentleman supports. When people were killed in Salisbury, his sympathies were with Russia. When terrorists were killing our people, his sympathies were with the IRA. And in the recent tanker attacks in the Gulf, his sympathies were with Iran. He never backs Britain, and he should never be Prime Minister. Killing our people.
I'm a firm believer that youth work is part of the answer to so many issues in our society and has a huge role to play in my Mansfield constituency, but currently we're at risk of losing vital youth work qualifications. The review of these qualifications was announced on April the 1st, but the funding has been delayed in the system. If it's not secured, we're in danger of seeing universities and colleges drop these qualifications from 2020. So will my right honourable friend ensure that this funding is signed off immediately so we can continue to train amazing youth workers?
Well, my honourable friend has raised an important issue and the importance of the proper training of these youth workers. We are absolutely committed to properly qualified and trained youth sector. Subject to a business case, we have committed to renewing funding for these qualifications and reviewing the youth work curriculum. I know DCMS are in very close contact with the National Youth Agency and aware of the timing issues and hope to make an announcement on this in the near future.
Ian Blackford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister for the reservists? I am happy today to be supporting a badge on supporting Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, and I hope in the days that the Prime Minister has left in office she will do what she can to secure the release of Nazin from jail in Iran. And I hope the Prime Minister will join many of us outside Parliament today in support of the climate justice activists. And I have to say to the Leader of the Opposition that it was the Scottish Government that was the first government in the UK to declare a climate emergency, and I hope that the UK responds to the leadership that Scotland is giving on this issue. Mr. Speaker, do or die, come what may. Those are the words of the Prime Minister's likely successor. The truth behind the Brexit chaos in the Tory party is encompassed in those words. The Tory dream is to drag us out of the European Union, no matter what the cost. Prime Minister, before you exit office, will you pledge to never vote for a successor willing to impose a devastating no-deal Brexit on all of us?
Well, I have to remind the right honourable gentleman yet again that he is due to ask me questions about my responsibilities as Prime Minister, and I would remind him yet again that as Prime Minister I voted 3 times in this House to ensure that we could take the UK out of the European Union with a deal that was good for the whole of the United Kingdom, and he voted effectively for no deal.
Ian Blackford. My goodness, it's no wonder she's leaving. That was no answer to the question. The Prime Minister is showing gross cowardice. On the one hand, the Tories are asking people to put their faith in the most incompetent Foreign Secretary in a century. A man who has made a career out of lying, who has spent his week avoiding the media, staging photos and playing to the extreme delusions of the Tory shires. On the other hand, we have the most incompetent Health Secretary in our history. A man who writes books on privatising our NHS. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives clearly don't like the truth. Someone so desperate for a chance at his 30-year Downing Street fantasy that he's...
I think the right honourable gentleman has concluded his inquiry. Well, if he... Order! If he hasn't, he needs to do so in a single sentence. Order! I don't want Mr. Cowan. I'm sure you're a well-intentioned fellow, but I require no counsel from you. One sentence. We've got a lot of questions to get through. A sentence. Well done. Mr. Blackford.
Mr. Speaker, in her last days in office, will she finally act in the best interest of these islands, not the Conservative Party, and admit that neither of the candidates for office should ever be elected Prime Minister? Mr. Speaker, in her last days in office, will she finally act in the best interest of these islands?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, either of the candidates for this high office would do a darn sight better job than anybody sitting on any of those.
Welcome the announcements that the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions made yesterday. Would my right honourable friend update the House about some of those plans and how she feels that they will enable more people living with disabilities and health conditions to play their full part in our society?
Can I first of all thank my honourable friend for the work that she did as Minister for Disabled People, which set a lot of the groundwork for the announcement we've been able to make on the disability strategy. There are many disabled people in our society who would love to actually be able to get into the workplace. One of the key issues underpinning that strategy is support for people, to enable them to take their full role in society, to get into the workplace, to ensure they have access to the support that they need. I'm very proud of the fact that nearly something like 950,000 more disabled people are now in the workplace, thanks to the actions of Conservatives in government. There is more for us to do. The disability strategy sets our path to do that and enable disabled people to play their full role in our society.
Caroline Flint.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Almost every infrastructure project across the UK requires British-made steel. The contracts for the next 5 years alone are worth £1 billion. But yesterday, UK Steel and community trade union members were asking me if the Scunthorpe Steelworks will still be working in 5 days' time. Will the Prime Minister guarantee that a month from now, before she leaves office, the Scunthorpe Steelworks will still be open?
Well, can I say to the right honourable lady, we are concerned about the situation in relation to the Scunthorpe Works in relation to British Steel. That's why my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, is engaging actively with the official receiver. Obviously, the official receiver has a responsibility in relation to this matter, but we are doing all that we can as a government, and I was pleased to meet with a number, obviously, as she knows, a number of members of Parliament who have steel interests in their constituencies to talk about the real impact that the closure of the works would have on people. That's why we're working so actively to try to ensure that we can retain employment in that area.
Luella Braverman.
Mr. Speaker, I'm due to give birth any day now. I'm hoping there won't be an emergency in the Commons. But can I just put on record my thanks to you, the former Leader of the House, this Government and cross-party MPs who have delivered the proxy voting scheme, which will enable my constituents to be represented during my maternity leave. Mr. Speaker, 11-year-old Ruby Lloyd from Hook and Warsash Primary School is campaigning for a pedestrian crossing on Warsash Road to encourage more pupils to walk to school, thereby improving road safety and air quality. Hundreds of local residents support her campaign, her headmistress supports her campaign, and so do her councillors. Will my right honourable friend get behind Ruby's campaign for safer roads in Fairfield to walk to school?
Can I first of all say to my honourable friend that we wish her the very best for the upcoming birth. And can I also say that I have a certain satisfaction having played a little role in ensuring that she and her husband actually got married, as she acknowledges. Can I say on the issue that she has referred to of Ruby, first of all, it's very good to see young people caring passionately about their local area and campaigning for their local area, and it's vital, obviously, that children can go to school in a safe environment. Of course, this is an issue for the local authority, but I would just like to wish Ruby the very best for her campaign.
Nick Thomas-Symonds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Universal credit is causing great hardship in my constituency. It is driving up debt, it is increasing food bank use, it is making people who are out of work worse off and people who are in work worse off. In her final weeks in office, will she act to halt the rollout of this failed policy, or will she simply leave this injustice burning?
I just say to the honourable gentleman, what lay behind universal credit was changing our benefit system. The legacy system we inherited from the Labour Party was one where over 1 million people were left on benefits for nearly a decade. What universal credit does is helps people into work and ensures that when they are in work, they are able to earn more. 200,000 more people in work. 1 million disabled people getting more money as a result of universal credit. 700,000 people getting the benefits they are entitled to as a result of universal credit. This is a policy that is working.
Masterton.
1 million disabled people
favourite times of the year with Wimbledon starting next week, and many members have already been enjoying hitting a few balls on the court in New Palace Yard. So will my right honourable friend take this opportunity to wish all the British players the best of luck in the championships, and also welcome the announcement from the Lawn Tennis Association of £250 million for 96 new indoor tennis centres to open up the sport to 3 million more people across the UK.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for in a very timely fashion raising this issue. I certainly wish all the very best to all the British players who have been participating in Wimbledon. I'd like to congratulate Andy Murray for his win in the doubles at Queen's at the weekend. I understand that there is an exhibition of tennis taking place here in Parliament today with the Paddock School from Putney taking part in that, and it's very good to see young people having that experience and having that opportunity, and I welcome the LTA, the fact that the LTA is directing funding across the whole country to where it's needed most to grow the sport from the grassroots up.
Mr. Khalid Mahmood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A recent YouGov poll into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party shows an astounding level of racism. Almost 50% polled would not want to see a Muslim Prime Minister. Only 8% would be proud if there was one. 67% believe racist myths about Muslim communities, and yet 8 out of 10 don't think this is a problem. In light of this, and as one of her final acts of her premiership, will the Prime Minister finally agree to commission an external inquiry into Islamophobia within her increasingly nasty party?
I say to the honourable gentleman, we take any allegations of Islamophobia very seriously in the Conservative Party. Every allegation is properly investigated. We have seen my right honourable friend, the chairman of the Conservative Party, take swift action. We have seen people suspended from the party. We have seen people excluded from the party. And I would just say to the honourable gentleman that it is in direct contrast to the way in which the Labour Party deals with anti-Semitism. Indeed, it is easier to be kicked out of the Labour Party for voting Liberal Democrat than for being anti-Semitic.
Speaker, there is a risk that complex conflicts thousands of miles away can sometimes appear deceptively simple at Westminster. Does my right honourable friend share my surprise that the Leader of the Opposition did not mention the Human Rights Watch had said last week that it was a potential war crime of Houthi drones targeting civilian targets in Saudi Arabia. And the World Food Programme has recently suspended aid in Houthi-controlled areas because of its diversion, aid workers not being allowed into Houthi areas, and aid being diverted to enrich Houthi forces. Is it not the case that it's best to recognise the horrors of war on all sides and concentrate not on being one-sided, but getting fully behind the tireless efforts of Martin Griffiths to seek peace in Yemen and support those efforts and bring this conflict to an end?
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend with his experience in the Foreign Office? He has seen and knows the complexities of these issues, and he's absolutely right that it is important that we look at what is happening in the Yemen and we recognise the actions that the Houthis have been taking as well. That is why it is so important to bring both sides around the table to ensure that we can get that agreed peace settlement and find supporting Martin Griffiths, the UN Special Envoy, in his efforts to bring the parties around the table. And he references the humanitarian aid. I said earlier the extent of humanitarian aid we've given. One of the great problems we've had to address is the way in which it is not always possible to get that aid to the people who need it most. Not because of our inability, because of the insurgents, the way in which the Houthis are preventing that aid getting to the people who need it most.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Brexit uncertainty is hitting manufacturing businesses in my Lincoln constituency, and local managing directors have told me that no deal will be absolutely catastrophic for them, for their exports to Europe, and it will put local jobs at risk. One firm has even put workers on short-time working already, temporarily. Does the Prime Minister accept that her government, and I include in this statement either of her likely successors, have made a catastrophic no-deal Brexit a more likely outcome?
I wanted to deliver Brexit with a deal. I brought a deal to this House, and the Honourable Lady and her colleagues voted 3 times against that deal.
Andrew Griffiths!
I wanted to deliver Brexit
on
with
Monday,
a deal.
160 years of food production on the same site in Burton ended with the announcement of the closure of the Kerry food plant in my constituency, affecting 900 jobs in both Burton and in the constituency of my friend from South Derbyshire. The Prime Minister will obviously have great sympathy for all of those workers who are concerned about their future, concerned about paying their mortgage, the holidays they have booked, and their families. Will she commit to a cross-department task force to try and help ensure we not only get those 900 people back into work, but we find a new use for that plant in Burton?
Well, obviously, as my honourable friend says, I'm sure this is going to be a very worrying time for the employees of Kerry Foods and their families. I understand that ministers from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy are speaking to my honourable friend to discuss the situation, and they will work with DEFRA and with housing communities and local government to explore the various options. We'll also want to work closely with businesses and local partners to ensure those affected are well supported, and indeed to explore options for the future of the site. Our thoughts are with those who will obviously be very concerned at this time.
J. Stevens.
Mr. Speaker, 7-year-old Talia Balade, who's the daughter of my constituent Gosha Simanovic, was abducted by her father and taken to Libya in 2012. The father returned here without Talia, and she remains in Libya with his mother. He was jailed but released on licence in 2017, and he's now absconded and is not reporting to the Home Office. All Gosha's legal avenues have been exhausted, and she is really desperate. Will the Prime Minister please use every channel available during her final weeks in office to secure Talia's return to her mother in the UK?
I say to the Honourable Lady, obviously she's outlined this case here in the House. I will ensure that this is a matter that is looked into properly by department concerned.
Andrew Mitchell.
Mr. Speaker, on the Yemen-Saudi catastrophe that is taking place, isn't it the case that Britain should move to a position of far greater neutrality, supporting a comprehensive ceasefire? And while Britain is absolutely right to condemn the Houthi attacks on Riyadh and Jeddah,
should we not also condemn the night-after-night bombings by the Saudi aircraft, which are killing innocent civilians and radicalising tens of thousands of young Yemenis?
I say to my right honourable friend, we have supported, we have called for a ceasefire, we've supported the efforts that have been made for a ceasefire, we've supported those efforts around Hodeidah, a very important port obviously for getting humanitarian relief in, but this is why it is so important that we continue to work with our international partners and with the UN Special Envoy to bring about that ceasefire, to enable the parties to come round the table, to get the political settlement, which is the only way to ensure the future security and stability of Yemen.
Jerry McCarthy.
On Friday, Mr. Speaker, a 14-year-old girl with autism and a learning disability was placed in a secure mental health unit 150 miles from home. Her mother's already had to stop work and her parents are now trying to scrape together the money to find temporary accommodation there so they can be near their child. Does the Prime Minister not agree that we really need decent, trusted facilities in every community for distressed children so that families don't have to go through this?
Well, the Honourable Lady makes a very important point, and obviously the emphasis that we are putting in the National Health Service on dealing with mental health and on improving the support that is available for mental health is a part of this. We are looking, and I held a round table looking at the outcomes of the review that we've had on the Mental Health Act, where exactly these sorts of issues about the type of circumstances in which people were being provided for was raised. And this is something that the NHS is looking at very carefully, and we are ensuring that there is funding available for further facilities to be provided.
Mary Robinson.
This afternoon I will meet with my Cheadle constituents who have travelled down to Westminster as part of the Christian Aid climate change lobby. With her world-leading commitment to a net zero target by 2050, the Prime Minister has shown that we are already leading the way. As we leave the EU, will she also urge her successor to put the environment at the heart of the Brexit negotiations?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this issue, and can I also congratulate those of her Cheadle constituents who are coming down to Westminster today to discuss this very important issue. We will. The government has made a major step, as she says, by legislating for net zero. I hope that the Labour efforts to stop this in the House of Lords will not be successful, so that we can actually ensure that that legislation is signed, and we will make every effort as we leave the European Union, working with our European partners and others, to ensure that we put this at the forefront of discussions and that the right approach is taken to it by countries around the world.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that the Prime Minister is slightly distracted by the intoxicating emotion of imminent freedom and release. But while she's still running the country, could she spare a thought for the 1.3 million FOMOs in our nation? FOMOs, of course, being pensioner households missing out. And the Prime Minister will be aware that today that excellent charity, Independent Aid, are actually seeking to support the campaign for the 3.5 million unclaimed pensioner benefits, according to the DWP's own figures. Would my honourable friend, would the Prime Minister agree with me that this 3.5 million should not be left to fructify in the coffers of the Treasury, but should flow to the FOMOs?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, which was put with his normal and natural theatricality in the chamber. As he will have seen, the Chancellor of the Exchequer will actually have heard the question that he has put. Obviously, we want to ensure that people who are entitled to benefits actually are in receipt of those benefits. But I would also say to the honourable gentleman that this government can be proud of the record of what we have done for pensioners through the triple lock and various other ways, such that pensioners are £1,600 a year better off under this government.
Sir John Hayes.
Today's mass lobby is about sustainability, but there can be no economic health nor communal well-being while soulless supermarkets make places ubiquitous whilst exploiting my Lincolnshire farmers and growers, and while heartless internet giants crush their small competitors. So will the Prime Minister use the tax system to redistribute power away from those heartless, soulless corporate monoliths to all that is small and eclectic and and local and particular. For Mr. Speaker, as you know, Schumacher said, small is beautiful. To redistribute power.
Can I say to my right honourable friend, he makes an important point about the importance of small businesses, the importance of local independent shops on our high street. We want to see those businesses supported. That is why, of course, we have taken steps already, for example, in relation to business rates. It's also why, for those who are concerned about the internet and the way the internet is being used to undermine some of those small businesses in terms of the retail environment, we are, of course, taking action in relation to those digital companies.
Evident
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the Conservative Party leadership candidates tour the country offering unicorns, the Prime Minister may be thinking about her legacy. Will the Prime Minister please listen and act on the entirely reasonable demands of all those affected by Grenfell-related issues and finally commit to fund retrofitting of sprinklers on all residential buildings and others where vulnerable people live or work, give clarity on installation and upkeep of external building insulation, adequately fund our fire and rescue services, and set up a social housing regulator with teeth. The public may thank you for it.
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, obviously, we are looking across the board. There's a number of issues that have been raised as a result of the terrible tragedy that occurred at Grenfell Tower, which we have already acted on, and we are continuing to work, as I said, indicated in response to her right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition last week. We are looking at issues such as social housing. I think one of the, while many people focus on the issue of cladding and the building standards, actually it was the fact that people's voices were not being heard from that social housing. That is a particular concern, and ensuring we have the right approach in relation to regulations there is important. And on sprinklers, the recommendation after Lacanau was not that every property over a certain height should have sprinklers retrofitted, and it is important to be clear about that. In relation
Jacob Rees-Mogg. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 15th of May, my right honourable friend welcomed a decision by NICE to allow the drug Spinraza, which is for spinal muscular atrophy, to be prescribed, including, we thought, to my constituent, the grandson of Mrs. Ogborn. NICE has now written to Mrs. Ogborn to say that they accept that the news story that appeared on the NICE website was not clear enough. That is code for saying my constituent's grandson will not receive this drug. When NICE says something, can it be ensured that it does it, and that bureaucratic flannel does not raise people's hope, then to doubt it?
Can I say to my honourable friend, I'm very concerned to hear the case that he has brought before the House of his constituent in relation to Spinraza. I will ensure that this is looked into. If NICE says that Spinraza is available, then obviously it should stand by its word.
If the honourable gentleman doesn't get a result and he wants it to be debated again before the summer recess, let me tell him, it will be debated. He can be quite certain of that. Tony Antoniazzi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a recently aired BBC Scotland documentary on medical cannabis, the chair of the BPNA, Finbar O'Callaghan, said that the NHS will not pay for life-changing medical cannabis for epileptic children by saying, even if you prescribe the product, the NHS isn't going to pay for it. Is his statement correct, Prime Minister?
I've answered questions on this in the past, including, I think, from the Honourable Lady. The government has changed the law. Specialist doctors on the General Medical Council Specialist Register can now prescribe cannabis-based products for medicinal use where there is clinical evidence of benefit. And NHS England and the Chief Medical Officer have made it clear that cannabis-based products can be prescribed for medicinal use in appropriate cases, but obviously we need to trust doctors to make clinical decisions in the best interests of patients.
Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on Thursday I was able, in the adjournment debate, to describe the barbaric treatment that my father-in-law received at a clinic in Barbados that ultimately led to his death. Mr. Speaker, it shows the influence of this chamber that I've been contacted by many people from around the country who now want to talk to me about similar issues. And this morning, Mr. Speaker, I've been contacted by a resident of Barbados who has said to me that actually the practices that go on in this clinic by Dr. David Sparman are far more horrific than we would recognise. May I ask my right honourable friend if she'd either meet with me or the relevant department of government so that I may inquire as to how we can work with the Barbadian authorities to shut this man down and make sure that what happened to my father-in-law cannot happen to any other citizen.
Can I say to my honourable friend, I remember the conversation he and I had when this happened in relation to his father-in-law and the obviously terrible tragedy that took place. I will certainly ensure that the proper department is able to ministers from the proper department are able to sit down with him and explore the issue that he has raised.
Thank you. Marion Fellows.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Figures released today show there are currently £973 million worth of arrears owed under the Child Maintenance Service. And while new enforcement powers are welcome, CMS's bark continues to be worse than its bite. The UK government must crack down on non-payment of maintenance to children and do it now. Will the Prime Minister agree to launch a full root and branch review of CMS to ensure a new strategy where maintenance payments are properly enforced and to lift these children who in many cases are in poverty because of lack of maintenance payments?
The Honourable Lady is right that we want to ensure that those maintenance payments are indeed made for those children, that people, normally it's fathers, but it can in some cases be mothers, but that they take their responsibilities seriously and recognise their responsibilities. This is a difficult area. For many years, efforts have been made by different governments to ensure that we get this right and that we ensure that those maintenance payments are made. I'm sure every member of this House has had constituency cases in relation to this issue. The simplified system that was brought in recent years, I think, has been working better than the previous system, but I'll ensure that the department, the relevant department, looks at the issue she's raised.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Harlow, my constituency, many horses and ponies are tied up and tethered by the roadside, maltreated, put in dangerous locations, often without access to food and water. Will the Prime Minister work to end the suffering of these beautiful animals and amend the current outdated Animal Welfare Act and Code of Practice for the welfare of horses so that it clarifies what the government's powers are and what the duties of local authorities to intervene? And will she urge the RSPCA to treat this as a major concern?
Well, I think the Honourable Gentleman has raised an issue which is important. I will certainly ensure that the Department looks at the issue that he's raised about the definitions in the legislation, and I would hope that the RSPCA would take this seriously as they take the ill treatment of other animals. An issue which is important. I will certainly ensure that the Department looks at the issue that he's raised about the definitions in the legislation, and I would hope that the RSPCA would take this seriously as they take the ill treatment of other animals.
Peter Grant. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, a brain tumour ended the life of Sarah Lawrence from Markinch, my constituency. Sarah was 44 years old, a brilliantly gifted young mathematician and statistician, tiny in physical stature, but a towering giant measured by any qualities of matter. Does the Prime Minister share my hope the funding for brain tumour research will be increased to bring forward the day that other families are not affected as of